Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the first day of Spring 1 2020. We're headed into the second half of the day, and our next session is Lessons from Veteran Agile Leaders and the Importance of Community. This is led by Kristin Pearson, who I did work with on an Air Force project. I can't wait to hear from her.
So welcome to our panel. We're excited you all have joined us. And I want to start even before intros with framing up what we hope you get out of this talk. I'm going to ask Andrew to share slides for a second, but don't worry, we only have 2 total. So like Spring 1 itself, you can kind of think of our talk as having tracks. First, our panelists have tons of experience, and we hope everyone learns some useful lessons during our session itself. We also think many of you will be inspired by the idea of growing community, like I was when I started this group, and maybe you'll take that inspiration and build something that fills a gap in your world. And finally, for those of you that are Agile, app dev, organizational leaders, or practice leaders, especially those that have transitioned from Pivotal Labs to standing up your own lab, we hope you consider joining our meetup. And that's something that we can talk about in the Q&A for anyone interested. Okay, now let's find out who your amazing panelists are today. We have a mix of VMware employees who run this group as a side hobby and some key client leaders who are our members. So I'll kick us off. I'm Kristin Pearson. I was formerly in the Air Force and have been with Pivotal and VMware exactly 3 years this week, and I'm a customer success manager. Jen?
My name is Jen Handler. I have a background in product management and agile leadership. I've been in product management for about 15 years, and I've been with VMware for about 4. Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Zusman. I'm a design practice lead with VMware Pivotal Labs, and I live in Dallas, Texas. And I will kick it over to Rob.
Thanks. I'm Rob Papandrea with the Boeing company here in Charleston, South Carolina. For the last 3 years, I've been leading the Digital Transformation Environment Labs, where we've worked with business across supply chain, manufacturing, engineering on bringing value to the business sooner. John?
Thanks, Rob. I'm John Handy. I've been with Ford Motor Company in Michigan for the last 17 years. My deep background in software engineering and architecture, and I've been running Ford's digital product incubator, FordLabs, for the last 2 years.
And I'm Josh Bullock. I've worked in design, various roles from leadership to individual practitioner for the past 20 years. I worked for the state of Missouri, as well as Cox Automotive. I worked in the automotive space in the private sector, worked for Dell, recently moved into the retail space. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, team. So let's jump in and first talk briefly about why this group was originally started, just to share some context. So to go back just a bit, in 2018, I had the privilege of working with the Air Force's Kessel Run leaders when they were thinking about standing up their own lab to transition product development teams to once they wrapped their engagements in Pivotal Labs. And we had some clients who had successfully done the same thing. So I reached out and I set up a couple visits. And I have to say, I was just blown away by the mutual learning and ideas exchanged during this time. And most of all, the genuine enthusiasm to share knowledge and to help out complete strangers from another organization. And it made me realize that while we already had some awesome user groups, nothing existed to connect our leaders of client app dev centers that were operating in this way. So it turns out a few others were seeing a similar need. And with a shout out to my early collaborators, in particular, Lee Hagedorn, Dino Bingham, Riley Longo, Jason Frazier, and Cookie, who needs no second name, we launched our first meetup in March of 2019. So with that context for everyone, I want to ask Rob and John, as 2 of our founding members, what were your thoughts when we approached you about this group? What had been your experience leading up to it? Did it seem like this community would be beneficial to you?
Sure, I can go first, Rob. So when you guys first approached me at FordLabs, I was super interested in this. I came into this position taking over for someone before me. I was new to this role, and I had all kinds of questions that I was asking myself, like, how do I measure success? How do I, what should my organization look like? And also the big question, which is, how do I be even better than we were yesterday? Like, how do I improve upon what I was given? So the chance to get together with folks that are doing similar things seemed awesome to me. Rob, how about you?
Yeah, similar feelings, John. First, I really wanted a bigger taste of what was occurring across industry. Very easy to get distracted here from things that fly. I've got final assembly on one shoulder, I've got the flight line on another shoulder, but seeing how things were happening across industries was really enticing to me. The second was I was experiencing real challenges being the disruptor, probably like you, in a 100-year-old company. It's like, you're going to do what? There's a sign right next to me here where I sit that says move fast and break things. And there's a manufacturing line right there. It freaks people out. And so it's like, how do you find that fit in a large company? Was that same awkwardness for you at Ford?
Yeah. I think you've mentioned to me before too, like when we all got together, there definitely is this sort of group therapy dynamic that can kick in also, where just having a place where we could all know that everybody who's joining is going through the same kinds of things that we are can be very comforting.
Yeah, it's like a product management specialist shrink.
Yeah.
I might interject. It's really interesting hearing you guys talk about it because, look, I came into the group a little bit later as a practice lead working with Dell at the time. So a lot of the work that we'd done up front was like a year in when I was able to join. What were some things that you all saw early on? Like, I would love hearing about that, and something that I've gotten a lot of from the group having that conversation. Rob, do you have like early examples? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to just feed off of John's last comment. The sort of the self-help group. The immediate thing I think a lot of us saw was we were under probably self-induced to some extent pressure to scale what had been done. The environment you see behind me, the environment behind John, it just feeds energy. I get goosebumps just like talking about it. It's like, well, we want more, and we wanted it yesterday. And, you get overwhelmed. And so immediately, just being able to talk to other leaders about the audaciousness of that big, hairy goal of trying to scale without losing the momentum, without losing the feel, the vibe, the purpose on a human-centered environment and business value. It's very intimidating to the leader. Believe it or not, change leaders are people too. And we have needs. We want to know we're going to achieve what we set out to accomplish. John, what were your, where do you think we went off initially?
Yeah, what you said really resonates with me. Where Ford was at in its journey at the time is we had been able to, in FordLabs, demonstrate some success, but it was very intangible. Like folks knew they wanted it. They knew they wanted more of it. But being able to, I think I mentioned this before, what does success really even look like? We know we like this, but am I measuring this based on cycle time when you're shipping code? Am I measuring this based on my organizational objectives? Am I measuring you based on how many customers you're interviewing? So I was getting a lot of questions like that. And what was nice is when I got to the group, everybody else was in the same boat. Everybody was having the same questions asked of them.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what the groups become. Andrew, can you show our second and last slide? Okay, so since we started, we have had 14 of these meetups, and we actually had one in person when we were all in person together last year at Spring One. We have gone from 6 to 11 organizations being represented. And we have really good attendance at these meetups with a number of practice leaders at these customer companies. We use Zoom, we use Slack to communicate, and we run these about every 6 weeks for 1 hour. That is frequency and timing that we've tuned over time. And we meet about a variety of topics. We have touched on topics like the ones that you see on the slide. We've also had some free-form conversation, just kind of, what are your challenges? And those tend to be some of the best ones. But I'd really like to hear from you all about what you get from this group, what brings you there. And you touched on it a little bit in some of your earlier answers, but I wonder if we can go a step further.
Rob, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So first, it really was about, getting a couple of the leaders together, and we had not thought about that scale. So that slide and the numbers we hit, those were not like, for once, the leaders did not have hairy, audacious goals. It was like, hey, let's get some people connected. Let's get them help. It's probably why we signed up for yet another thing. And for me, selfishly, my big push in my career has been breakthrough performance in teams. And I love creating those experiences for people and being able to connect and see different environments, different cultures of how those things were occurring. I was immediately blown away by the international feel of other companies and just recognizing that, time zones were not the only barriers that we were encountering. I then and now, still very much marvel at like what Kessel Run has done inside of the U.S. Air Force.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they've conquered Everest. We'll be fine on this little hill. We'll be okay.
They can do it. We can do it.
Yes. That was a compliment, Kristin. And so the other piece was, building up trust in that group in a way that sort of gives that psychological safety that we all want within our groups, but that you'd have this sort of safe think tank. Like, hey, I'm going to throw out this crazy idea and we might do nothing with it. And I might hear it's really bad, or I might hear, oh, you like that idea? Oh, that was a good idea. Okay, don't take it. I'm going to run with it. Was really critical for me in terms of things I got out. And I will say it definitely boosted, my own confidence in terms of just idea generation. Josh, your thoughts from a practice lead perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a ton of value that we got coming in because we were brought in as practice leads a little bit later. So it was fantastic to be able to hear from other folks in other large organizations that are dealing with similar challenges, because you're kind of tip of the spear. You're kind of on the front lines all the time. None of the effort really feels like it's enough. It's not happening quickly enough. You've kind of got a better way of operating, and you just want to give it away to everyone else. And it's like, if we just kind of acclimated to this new way of working, it'd be great. It's been great hearing like your story, or as we talked about the Kessel Run team, what they're doing at the Air Force, like as a practice lead, understanding like how their practice leads were operating, and or how you started by creating the practice. So we only had a couple of designers, I remember hearing in one of the calls. It's like, well, we charge them with going forth and like they own building community. How you get there, it doesn't matter, but like that's really what we want to do, to have that take root and be able to move forward. So being able to understand some of those techniques, I mean, it's kind of lonely out front, and there's power in numbers. So if we don't find it internally inside of our organizations, it's useful to have a group like this that we can come to. And it's like, hey, what do you think about this? We're thinking of trying this, or we're challenged in this way. What did you do? Have you dealt with something similar? And having that group, just this group, to be able to come to, and it's like, oh yeah, we tried that. We didn't have a whole lot of success with that because of these reasons. We then did this, and like being able to have that kind of sounding board is fantastic. Is really, really useful on the ground.
And I think that's a really great segue into the question I have for the group. What are some of those like specific aha moments or takeaways that you've had from the group? We've heard about measuring success and about meeting others across the industry. What were some like specific things that you were able to take back and use at your organizations?
So I'll jump in on this one. So I think to me, there's kind of two like categories. One is just the raw content that we covered, and we can talk a little bit about some of the subjects that we've covered, but there's also a meta element to it too, which is like looking at the choices that the leaders in the different companies are having to make. Like some groups might be running trying to do large scale organizational transformation where they're going wide. They're going to try to affect their whole company, but maybe it's not going that deep. Like, let's see if we can get some practices and going broad. Other groups or other folks that join our group are like, okay, we're going to go real deep. We're going to mark a line in the carpet. Everybody that's on this side of the line works the way that we do. So another way of looking at it is some of these little labs and incubators are running like professional services organizations within their company. Some report in through a product line, and some are trying to kind of take over the entire IT portion of their company and transform the whole thing. And just by watching what everybody is doing, you can start to understand like, oh, this is about how big I think I could get before it'll get weird. Or these are the types of metrics that folks that are running as a professional services outfit use. So in addition to just the content that we covered, just being able to kind of anthropologically study each other, I think has been really valuable.
Yeah, I think we're due up for that honorary certification in cultural anthropology, by the way. For me, I was definitely pushed in my own learning agility because of the network. That's my, sort of deep meta. And I remember when Jen approached me about, hey, why don't you come to the next meetup and tell the Boeing story? And I was like, okay, but I wanted to be better. and I remember listening to the questions and me being very critical of myself and what I was sharing, and the curiosity that came in from the group really helped me realize like just the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. That probably in a given day I'd either been forgetful of or dare I'd say overcritical of. That was huge for me. I think Josh just mentioned about the practice leads coming in. When I saw the one meetup we had where we brought in practice leadership from a bunch of different companies, all of a sudden it was like, oh wow, this is great. We're not a cult-like following. These are just people who really believe in their craft, and it occurs at many different industries, in many different companies, and this is normal, primarily. And like that one was, I knew we had achieved something unique where people were just, really coming out of their own shells and opening their minds. And then, I let Josh cue in, but one of the things I, shamelessly begged for help from Dell was they came in and talked scorecards once. And I was like, oh, can we talk this offline? I would love to know more. And then when I got the story offline, I realized it was nothing simple copy and paste. That's for sure. Josh, what about you? What were your sort of big ahas?
Similar to what you've already mentioned, just, I'm going to say it again, there's power in numbers. Just understanding like we may be kind of the crazy ones, but just having that camaraderie and being able to share those techniques, things like OGSM, objectives, goals, strategies, measures. Like I know that there was a big conversation along those lines that was incredibly insightful because we could share like how are we taking people through that? How are we helping them move forward? Metrics. There's been a conversation about metrics because metrics a lot of times are very, very challenging, especially when you start describing outcomes. How do we define an outcome? And over time, these challenges and there's new problems that come up. And having an active group like this to bring that in and get somebody else's perspective is really invaluable. But most recently, I'll call out specifically, we had the meetup on retros was amazing. A lot of different techniques that we talked about, even like the idea of like having a micro retrospective at the end of a meeting. Was this really useful? Did you feel like you were in prison? How effective was that time expenditure? Like just being able to share some of those techniques because the challenges are always different, and being able to just take it and bring it into our organization and try it out and see if it works is just invaluable forever.
Yeah, what I loved about that retro one that Andrew led was he came in with like this greatest hits album. And he just was like, hey, I've got my family photo album. Let me tell you what's going on in here. oh, but it's on retros.
Yes.
And I was like, I have a new level of respect for this man.
Yeah.
And in a time of COVID and the pandemic, it was so relevant. I mean, my wife's like, we're not doing a home retro. But like there was,
I may have run
so
one.
much in there. It was great.
One that I know that I was actually talking about with my team just today was the growth board meetup that we did. So a hot topic that always comes up with us is how do I assess product health? And what is the best way to do that? And can we move away from some of the old fashioned like status update, red, green, yellow ways of doing things? You know, show me your velocity. Like, can we move beyond that and start talking about product wellness and team wellness? And another challenge that I run into is on the enablement side. Like, I will work on something in FordLabs, and then eventually it will kind of leave the incubator and go out into the wild and have to survive on its own. And so we are constantly looking at how we can do a better job so that when it leaves the nest, it's healthy and it can continue. And what are the things that are most important to continue versus the things where it's okay if some of these slip and slide a little bit. But I felt like that topic hit a lot of those things.
Yeah, the growth board's a really interesting one. I mean, like there's some of these things that feel really basic, but they continually come up because all of our organizations are different. They're all dealing with these things. And last time I checked, none of us have been through like a pandemic. Like we're all doing some of these things for the very first time. Even things that we've done before, it's the first time because the variables have changed. So even defining something like enablement is fantastic. Like that's a big term. When you say that, what do you mean? And like having a group like this where we can jump in and compare some notes is really, really useful. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah, go ahead.
Like I'm thinking like just on enablement, does enablement mean you taught extreme programming and that's good enough? Does enablement mean you got this product started? Okay, cool. That was good enough. Does enablement mean I have short cycle times? Like what? And the product itself was enabled. Like, is it we've trained your folks? Is it we've incubated the product or put in place something? I don't want to say processed because that's too rigid, but put in place something that can continue on and live. Like, what does enablement look like?
And what does good enablement look like?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like fascinating. Like, is it okay? You know, like everybody's on a different journey. How do we start to articulate that? And do you start at the ground, you know, the grassroots level? Is it greenfield or is it brownfield? Like there's all kinds of different modifiers for different teams and organizations. Rob, like, do you have anything that stands out to you?
You know, I think the biggest thing going across the retro topic, the growth board topic, and all of that was in a role of leadership, you will be tested. Will you have the stamina, the resilience, a big word, right, in 2020, that helps you recognize that the people you're working with, they're good people, but they don't know what you know. However, they're a little self-serving. However, they're not villains, so let's not vilify them. And so I don't know anybody John works with. I don't know the names. I don't know the names Josh has. And so it was just this person. And it really helped to take down and we don't vilify people ever, by the way. But it really took down any inkling we would have because they're like, hey, they're just good people. And how do we bring that out? And I think that's where our ideas really took it to the next level because of this group.
It's been very safe too. Like we've had members that are like, look, I'd love it. What you guys are doing sounds really bold, like lean and Kanban and more advanced stuff. And we're kind of just doing scaled agile. And my product managers feel more like scrum masters, not fully product man. It's safe.
John, I'm going to jump in because we're almost out of time. So we can head to Q&A and keep the conversation going. Sure. But first of all, thanks so much to everyone who joined us today. And a huge shout out to our panelists. I've really enjoyed working with you all to put this together. And last thing, Rob, John, and Josh, you've really inspired the three of us to keep thinking about growing community. And I wanted to share that we made a donation, which will be matched by VMware's awesome matching program to Black Girls Code in honor of our panel and our meetup. So thank you all so much again for being part of this community and sharing your expertise. And let's head to Q&A and find out what the audience wants to hear more about. All right, over to you, Tommy.
Thanks, Kristin, for highlighting the importance of community. Don't forget to attend Kristin's Q&A, and it's listed in Slack. Up next, whoops, it is live. Up next, we're going to hear about leading engineers to water, the art, science, and culture of technical coaching. See you in a minute.